Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. My name is Vikram Shah and I'm the founder of Vikram Shah Consulting, a boutique admissions consulting firm that helps candidates get into top B schools. I've been doing this since 2009 and I'm very happy to be here at the start of a new season. And at this point, most candidates will be wondering what is the strategy that I should go with? How should I apply to schools? Should I get my applications out all in round one? Should I push some into round two? Should I target my most competitive schools or my dream schools early, or should I do them a little later? If I'm a reapplicant, should I apply to all these schools in round two when I've strengthened my profile, or should I apply to them in round one? So I'm going to try and answer all of these questions today, and I'm going to cater to a variety of different groups and different audiences. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to put it in the comment section out here. But I'd prefer it if you would join the chat, which is going to be held after this on GMAT Club on the website of one of the forums. The link to that chat is given at the bottom of the screen, and we will again share it towards the end of this small presentation. I'm going to take roughly about 20 minutes, and if you have any questions, like I said, just put it in the chat, right? Okay, great. So can we start with the presentation? Great. So we're covering all different sorts of application strategies today. And ideally, I'm going to break this up into two groups. One is addressing the audience, and the second part is about different factors that you need to consider. So this ideally is going to start with reapplicants, younger applicants, more experienced candidates, people with less competitive GMAT scores or GRE scores, and overrepresented groups. The second part of this will be for people considering applying to round one, round two. I'm going to give you some perspective on what you should consider, US versus European schools, a new factor, possibly something that you possibly haven't considered, interviewing skills, and how that can play a decision in your application strategy, or even the length and difficulty of applications and how that can affect you and how you should plan for that as part of your application strategy. So with that said, let's get straight to it. So I'm going to first start with addressing reapplicants. So the fundamental question that most reapplicants tend to ask me is, should I apply in round one or round two? And I think when you're considering that, because when you're reapplying to a school, there's a strong chance that you've already been communicating with the school all throughout. Maybe you applied in round one or in round two, but you sent a series of updates. And you've updated them all the way up to May and June. And then you're going to say, hey, I've got nothing more to add. But if you're a reapplicant, my strong suggestion would be apply as early as possible. You really want to show a commitment to the school. You really want to show that you're interested in the school. That's the only school that you want to go to. So by applying early, it gives the school, it shows the school that sense of commitment. So if a school has an early action round, definitely apply there. If they have an early action round and in round one, like Duke, for example, as a reapplicant, you want to be applying in early action and not in round one. If you're trying to apply in round two and you're going to say, hey, let me build my candidacy and strengthen further, and I'll have more to add then, I think you're going to be at a disadvantage. So that's not something that I would recommend as a reapplicant. So I would definitely say apply as early as possible. However, if you apply to 5 schools last year and you're going to reapply to all 5 schools, I don't think that's a great strategy. I think what you would do is be selective. You can reapply to all 5, but definitely have more applications and some fresh applications out. Maybe you've made mistakes in your past applications, which might be difficult to correct. So have a bunch of fresh applications. I would say at least 50%. So suppose you're applying to 5 schools in round one. My suggestion would be at least 3 should be fresh applications and 2 should be reapplications. And definitely have one safe school early in round one. That gives you a sense of comfort. If you get into the safe school, you don't get into the other schools, and we'll talk about that later as well, and how to go about round one versus round two. Now, specifically for younger applicants. So a lot of the time I get people just graduating from college or someone with just about a year's experience wanting to apply. And I think the fundamental question, sometimes people with even 2 years experience, I think the fundamental question you should start when you start on this journey is to ask yourself, are you willing to wait another year or must you go this year? And if you answer that, then you pretty much get an answer which determines your strategy. So if you're willing to wait another year, then I would say go all out. You apply to your target schools and your dream schools early. Make sure you have applications and open for next year. So you're not exhausting all your schools for this year. You're going to send out a couple of fresh applications next year. Target schools where you see a greater percentage of younger candidates getting in. So you'll definitely see that in some of schools like a Harvard, Stanford, etc. Right? But there are lots of other schools as well, whether they're going to Indiana Kelly, you tend to see schools which have younger candidates. Do not apply to schools which prefer older candidates if you're very young, even if that's your preferred choice. And if you're still in, you're just about a year out of college or a few months out of college, consider deferred admissions as well. So that would be the strategy. And I don't think you should have a safe school at all if you're willing to wait for another year. However, if you must go the following year, then definitely have a safe school in round one and one or two. That's entirely up to you. But if you must go, then I would say sure, two schools, two safe schools in round one is great. Make sure you're applying to your target schools also in round one. And that's the strategy that I would go with. I think once you secure admission, then you can possibly go crazy and in round two. But make sure if you must go this year, that you're also applying to your dream schools. So you have no regrets at the end of it. So basically, with both strategies, in one sense, you're going all in, right? You're not really holding back as such. So if you're willing to wait another year, you're going all in with your dream schools very early, but making sure that you have options open for next year. And if you must go next year, then you're not restricting yourself at all. You're going to apply to your dream schools, safe schools, and your target schools all uh, this year itself, but you may push your dream schools to round two. Now, especially for more experienced candidates. Now, who is more experienced? So let's define that. I would say someone with about 8 to 10 years experience or even more. And I see a lot of them coming to me and saying, listen, we want to apply to school, let's apply to a 2 year program. And I think the things that you want to consider are a lot more because suddenly there's an opportunity cost. From a school's perspective as well, you're not the typical audience that their recruiters would come and recruit for, especially if you have 10, 12, 14 years experience. So schools sometimes may worry about are they going to place you? Will you be happy at the end of it if you do not get recruited? So I think you need to kind of consider that, right? But so if you're planning to apply to 2 year programs as well, irrespective if you are planning to apply as an older candidate, I would definitely say consider 1 year programs, whether in the US or whether in Europe. Uh, Make that a part of your application strategy. So at least you're covered. Secondly, I would say as an older candidate, seriously consider part-time programs. Consider uh, whether it's your company sponsoring you or whether you're going to go to another country for about a week and a month and come back. Consider that because there's a huge opportunity cost, right? The older you are, the greater the salary that you're earning. Spending 2 years away in school, there's that much of an opportunity cost. Then there's a risk as well of whether you'll find the sort of recruiters that you're looking for, because chances are you'll have to network a lot. So that's something that you should definitely consider as a more experienced candidate. And if you are applying to schools which uh, offer 2 year programs or longer duration programs, choose schools which prefer experience and have more experienced candidates. So I think that would be the way I would go about shortlisting schools and applying. And definitely, if you're applying to the 1 year programs, apply to those early rather than later. Make sure that you're safe because an experienced candidate sometimes you're neither here nor there. So 1 year programs early in the application cycle. Now, specifically for people with less competitive test scores, your GRE, GMAT, or even your academic performance if it's not been great. So I would say apply in early action. Definitely show that you have that commitment to a school and apply early. It could be advantageous. If schools have open interviews, then take advantage of that and apply for an open interview, even if it means that you're going to submit an application later. These are things that you can do to improve your chances of getting into a school. Apply to your safe schools early in round one and do not start with the ambitious schools. I would start with safe schools and then I'd get more ambitious there on. And probably if I had a less competitive or GMAT or GRE score, I'd apply to at least two safe schools in round one. And I would go all out only once I had an admit. So for people from overrepresented groups, that is your typical Indian male IT, uh, Indian male working in an IT company like a TCS or an Infosys, I would say that if you feel that you're overrepresented, if you feel that you're not competitive enough, there are too many people, and you're not really differentiated, too many people from a similar background who are applying, then apply in early action. It'll be an advantage. Yes, it does mean that you may have to commit early, but then you choose your schools wisely as well. I would also say be a little bit more selective in the sort of schools that you apply to. So don't apply to schools which are very, very big on diversity. If they're going to be looking for someone with a very similar profile as yours and they find that early, then you might find it really difficult to get into those schools, right? So, but apply to schools which have a larger class size. And I think that'll improve your chances of getting in. And definitely in part of your school selection strategy, you don't want to go just anywhere. Apply to schools where your target recruiters, schools which your target recruiters really patronize. So as an overrepresented candidate, as an Indian IT male, for example, that's the strategy that I would adopt. Definitely early action and save schools early. Now, there are some other factors that you may want to consider as part of your application strategy. Round one round versus round two. The question I'm asked all the time. In fact, today I got a call and I spoke with another candidate who was asking whether he should apply in round one. He's planning to take his GRE in August. He doesn't have a competitive GRE score right now, and yet he was starting round one. And I said it's very difficult knowing what schools you're going to be applying to if you don't have a test score and if you're not ready. So the general rule I would say is apply when your candidacy is strongest. If your candidacy is not going to be strong in round one, don't apply in round one. Apply in round two. There's no point just throwing in an application, hoping that you'll be at an advantage if you apply early if you are not competitive. Not competitive could be on the basis of GMAT, GRE, or could be on other factors as well. So consider that. So possibly at this stage, it'll be the test scores which will help you determine round one versus round two, or how much time you have to put in a competitive application. So if you feel that you need more time for an application, my suggestion would be take the time. Apply to less schools if you must, but take the time and invest that in your application. If you feel the test scores are not competitive enough at this stage, yet you want to apply in round one, I would say hold on, get a good score. When you've taken the test multiple times and you know that you can do no better than this and you've given it your best, then you apply. That's the time you know when you have confidence that okay, I've put in my best. This is my best possible test score. Yes, there are more seats available in round one. There are more scholarships available in round one. You get a huge advantage if you apply in early action or in rolling admissions. But if you're not competitive, there's really no point. There's no point getting a ding later, right? Um, so that's my take on round one versus round two. However, if there are schools which have a really small class size and you're going to be at a disadvantage by applying later, then perhaps you consider applying in round one. Yet, I would say apply when your candidacy is strongest only. Okay, to the debate of US versus European schools. And I think um, when you're applying from an application strategy perspective, the fundamental question you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to lose a deposit? And the reason I say this is because at most US schools, your deposit is relatively small. It's in the range of about $1,500 to $2,000, $3,000, which compared to most of the European schools is small because when you're applying to European schools, should you get admission, you usually have to pay about 10% of your tuition fee as a deposit to reserve your seat. Now, if you're going to be applying to a school which is number four, number five, and number six, on your choice or on your list of schools, and it's not your preferred choice, but you apply to that school early and you get a decision early, then you're going to be faced with a question: do I reserve my seat or do I let it go? And that's not a situation that you want to be in. So you plan your applications accordingly, considering the amount of money that you're willing to forego by paying deposits. And if you're trying to save your deposits at all schools, which you obviously with most people will try and do, you really want to plan your applications. You really want to see which are my preferred schools, which are my safe schools, which decisions do you want to get early, and which ones I'm happy to get later as well. But when you are following this and you're weighing this, you must understand that at certain schools you'll get an advantage if you apply early, and that also includes some European schools, whether it's in Oxford or whether it is a London Business School, and that's something that you need to consider. London Business School, fortunately, doesn't have as high tuition fee deposits, relatively small compared to some of the other European schools. But that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're planning your applications and your application strategy. Uh, sure. Now, this is something that possibly you may not have considered. But if your interviewing school skills are really good, then I would say apply to schools which conduct open interviews or schools which try and interview as many candidates as possible. A great example would be Kellogg. So at least you get a chance to really sell yourself and kind of guaranteeing that. And I find some candidates who are really, really good interviews, and I say, hey, why not take advantage of that? So that's a fundamental question you need to ask yourself. Is possibly something that you've not considered. For people who are not particularly strong at interviewing or tend to get very nervous or not very comfortable, I would also say apply to a couple of schools early. Make sure that you guarantee yourself an interview early in round one. And why do I say that as part of your application strategy? So you can practice as much as you want backstage with friends, with other consultants, etc. But there's nothing like a live experience. So when you are in a live interview, and should you botch up, at least that's an option that you're willing to forego. Think of it as a test run, right? So you're really there on the playing field, you're playing the game. You make a mistake, no problem, but it's not the real thing. It's like a preseason. So I'd say if you're not so great at interviewing, consider that as part of your application strategy. Applying to a school where you know that you will get yourself an interview. You will interview and you may botch it up, and that's fine. You may do really well as well, but that'll be a great learning experience, right? And then you're ready for your next set of interviews with your preferred choice of schools. So consider that as part of your application strategy. For people applying to schools which have really lengthy and difficult applications, and especially since there's so much pressure to get as many applications out in round one as possible, I think when you're applying to a school which is open-ended questions or a really lengthy application, whether it's an INSEAD or London Business School, etc., when you start on the application or you're starting on the application cycle as such, budget time for every application. So supposing you've decided to get 5 applications out in round one, your preferred school is an INSEAD or an LBS, you tend to spend disproportionate amount of time only in that particular school. I see that happen very often for people applying to a Stanford or a Harvard, and then suddenly they find themselves rushing out all the other applications and trying to finish them in a matter of a few days. Then you don't really put in that sort of effort into the other applications. What also happens with schools such as a Harvard or a Stanford, which have open-ended questions, if you tackle those applications first, since they're so open-ended, you can kind of get lost in answering those questions. Sometimes you may find that your essays go from, instead of going from a typical 4 to 5 or 7 edits, may go up to 15 or 20 edits. And you're rewriting and you're constantly brainstorming for something, new ideas, and something else will strike you later. So I would say rather than that, target schools which have very directed questions, which will help you develop your stories and explain them. And then you move on to applications which have open-ended essay questions. So for me, Harvard and Stanford would not be the first applications I would tackle, even though they're high priority for me. But I would target a school which allows me to uh, develop my essays and my stories early, and then I would move on to the open-ended questions. And for schools which are very lengthy, so whether it is a Stanford or uh, INSEAD or London Business School, I would set an amount of time that I want to spend on that application, and the amount of time I want to spend on every other application thereafter as well. So I clearly allocate time, and I think once you work with those deadlines and you keep those as a fixed deadline, then you're more likely to expedite those applications or make at least strong decisions on which applications to prioritize and which ones not to. So if you feel that you're going to go over by a week on a particular lengthy application, then you know the impact of it on subsequent applications because you've already allocated time to that. So those are going to be the strategies that I would go in for, or that's how I would plan my entire application strategy when I'm starting to apply in this application cycle. I hope these strategies help you. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section or just join me on GMAT Club in the forum, which is in the chat room, which is going to start in about 7 to 8 minutes. The link's right here. I'm happy to discuss these sort of application strategies with you. But just to recap, uh, round one is not for everyone. Apply when your candidacy is strongest. As a reapplicant, you want to be applying in round one. And I'm going to very quickly go over that again. Reapplicant round one, but you definitely want to have a couple of schools in round two. As a person with a less competitive GMAT score or younger candidate, you want to be a person with a less competitive GMAT score. You want to be applying early, taking advantage of early action, etc. Um, and for younger candidates, you want to make up your mind whether this is the only year you want to apply to, or you're willing to wait another year. So with that said, I wish you guys all the very best for this application cycle. I hope you find these strategies useful, and these are strategies that I've developed over a period of time with a lot of experience, and they've really helped my candidates, and I hope they help you as well. I will see you guys online in the chat room. Thank you very much. See you soon.